So when you think North and South, what comes to mind?
South Carolina, Mississippi, 99-degree weather with 100% humidity, wearing those Civil War costumes, and all the makeup people who, of course, today, because of COVID, can't come up and touch you up, really.
Mm.
Or it's very strict the way they do that. It was, it was, being in the Deep South was just very, very, first of all, I'm from the North, and I'm from an extremely left-wing liberal family, and my uncle Mel Wolfe was the national legal director for the American Civil Liberties Union. So he marched in Selma. He marched in, he was very involved in civil rights. So for me to be playing the son of a bitch, racist Southern guy, it's interesting though, because I often got approached by fans who happened to be African American, and who said they loved me as the bad guy. As a matter of fact, the first time I met Morgan Freeman, it turned out that I had moved into his building, and he came up to me. This was like in 1987, I think. And he had been, I didn't realize he was in the building. At that time, he wasn't a huge movie star, but he was a big theater presence in New York. And he came up to me and said how much he loved my work in North and South, which I, so it was, it was a wonderful job. It was like the first time I had been working so steadily. It was that first series for North and South Part 1 was 12 hours. So it was months and months of work. And it was a very diverse, when I say diverse, it wasn't that diverse a cast in terms of like major roles for Black actors, actually. There were some larger roles, but a lot of people from, I was a New York actor, and there were a lot of people from Los Angeles. So it was, people had different ways of working, but it was it was a great job, and it was a big chunk of material. So it was fun. I'd already learned how to ride a horse English style when I did a miniseries called George Washington and played Lafayette in the miniseries of George Washington. So nobody knew how to ride a horse then. All the New York actors said they knew how to ride, and none of us knew how to ride. And they had to stop production for 3 days to put us all in riding school. So by the time I got to North and South and was supposed to be an excellent swordsman and a good rider, I actually was a pretty good rider. And my wife at the time, I think, was doing Highlander. She was playing a lead role in Highlander in the original movie in England. And when I visited it there, I went to fencing school near Wimbledon, the London School of Fencing. So that's where I learned how to fence. Ramblings. There you go. Those are the thoughts that come to mind.
Do you remember how you got the part?
Yeah, it was a wonderful casting director who has since passed away, whose name was Phyllis Huffman. Phyllis also did all the Clint Eastwood movies forever. She was the only one that cast any of Clint's movies. And I knew her husband, David Huffman, who also passed away. And she brought me in to audition for the role, knowing that I'd done a fair amount of stage work for a young actor so I was in Los Angeles at the time. Actually, I think living in their guest house. And she brought me in, and I just went for it. And they decided to screen test me when they were still doing screen tests. I guess they do that. I mean, where you have makeup and where you are actually on a studio set, and it's all lit, and there's a real cameraman, and it's a real camera. And so I had a screen test for about 2 hours or so. Had to do a few scenes. They dressed me up in the Civil War stuff and put me in hair and makeup. And I think, who was it that I was auditioning against? I remember, I'll remember, it was interesting. So it was a big deal. It was a big deal for me. It was a lot I was very tense, but I was very committed to the whole thing, very committed to the Southern accent, very committed to, I've always enjoyed doing dialects. As a matter of fact, although I probably won't do this for you, being English, I was sort of one of the go-to people in New York for English characters. I did a Barry Keefe play, and there were always wonderful English actors who were dialect coaches who helped me out. So, yeah.
Now, according to IMDb, and I have no idea if this is true or not, so you can be the deciding vote on this, I suppose, but it says that leading up to your audition, you'd recently been mugged in a parking lot, and that going into your audition, you used this experience to kind of get into the character. Is there any truth in that?
Oh, no, for North and South?
Yeah.
Say that again? I've never heard this.
Okay, so on IMDb, it says that for your audition, you'd recently been mugged in a parking lot, and that going into your audition, you used this experience to kind of get into the character.
Now that's really interesting. I don't remember if I was mugged in Studio City. I don't remember it. Maybe. Oh, it did happen. It did happen, and maybe that experience. You bring your life experience to things, and maybe that sort of emotional response I had to that figured in some way to. The character was a very, very. He was a narcissistic, insecure, dare I say, Trump-like character. Hurt people hurt people. And he was a damaged individual, I think, and when people come up, and I certainly played my share of what people would refer to as bad guys, I think you learn early on as an actor that you can never approach your character as a bad guy. I guess Richard III, and I've been fortunate enough to have my share of Shakespeare under my belt, some of which was directed by English directors like, one is Philip Prowse from Scotland, and then Trevor Nunn I've worked with 3 times. Most recently in a Shakespeare production, actually. But we did Pericles in Brooklyn. But you have to have, I just think that when you're playing somebody who's referred to as evil, you have to be in love with your own character. You have to feel sympathetic. You can't sort of remove yourself and go, oh, this is a bad guy. What I was going to say is Richard III, that character, in fact, revels in his evilness. So that's different. But in the case of Bent, I don't think he thinks he's evil. I think he thinks he's right.
So yeah, sorry, go on.
No. So if there was any connection between the parking lot and the, it's just that when you've been wounded in some way, you can respond to it in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways is anger and revenge. So sure, you use everything if you're an actor.
I guess you kind of touched on it there slightly, but why Elkanah Bent then? Are you kind of drawn to the villainous role?
No. I think certainly, it depends. You're drawn to the writing of the role. The role was so big, and some would say even over the top. But I think I like larger than life characters, but then I think you have to ground them. So I'm attracted to that idea. I'm not unattracted to good people as well, as long as they're complex. But you had to keep grounding Bent, because the story, especially as it got to the 3rd miniseries, it got even, I think I'd survived what looked like I'd been, I think, killed twice, blown up in my own munitions barn. And where else? Anyway, I kept coming back to life. And I just think you have to keep going back to ground in order to make it. Yeah, but I love the theatrical nature of the character.
So Bent is one of a few great villains in the series. Again, you've kind of really touched on it, but I mean, I suppose the books are obviously there as well. I mean, how do you play them? Is it you go to the book, or is it you kind of channel that yourself from a place of villainy or a place of his insecurity or greed? I mean, were you aware of the books, I suppose, going into it?
Yeah, no, I read the books. I read the books, and some of the things were in the books, some of the things were not in the books. Some of the script differed from it. And at a certain point, I think this is true. When I played Sinatra in the miniseries Sinatra, at a certain point, you have to make the character your own. You have to find the life of the character, you know, on the set, on the day, within the context of what the writing is and where the, you know, where the arc is going. I think I remember reading something about Ralph Richardson coming back to see Laurence Olivier when he was playing, I may get this wrong, but it's something like this. I think he was playing Iago, and he was having a terrible time doing Iago. He wasn't doing Othello this time, he was doing Iago. And Richardson came back and said, and Laurence Olivier thought he was doing a terrible job. And he said that to Ralph Richardson. He said, well, you're right, Larry. He said, you're absolutely right, because you hate your character, and you're not going to be able to play your character until you fall in love with your character. And that's all I'm saying. So, I keep going back to that. I think you have to keep, you have to find how it lives in you and how you can express it. I think my character, if you go back to the books, I remember John Jakes, who wrote the books, came onto set, I think in the second, and he said, for one thing, I think physically in the books, he was deformed in some way. He was not what you would have called, you know, when you're playing an evil character, you can go the Ted Bundy route. I guess Ted Bundy in life was, in fact, quite a charming, leading man kind of fellow, right? In the book, he's not. In the book, Bent was not only not charming, but he was, I think, physically not deformed in some way. I forget exactly what it was. So it was different. You have to make it your own, you know, but you know, you try to pull from whatever sources are possible, and you throw out what doesn't feel useful. And then maybe you're wrong, you know, and the truth is I go back and look at that occasionally when I see scenes from it. I like what I've done. And then occasionally I go, fuck, excuse my language. I wish I could have played that differently. I don't like what I did there, you know. Wish I would have been a little subtler
there. Production of books 1 and 2 took around 2 years to make. It's been touted as the Gone with the Wind for television. Did it feel like a big deal at the time when you were making it?
Just felt like fun when we were making it. Didn't feel like a big deal. I mean, it felt like a big deal to me because here I was for the first time. I mean, I come from a very modest background, and here it is for the first time that I'm actually making the kind of money that I can not only pay my rent, but put money away. And that was a great feeling. And then I'm working with actors I'm working with all these actors, some of whom were terrific. And I just had I didn't think, you know, I mean, I guess when it finally came out, I forget whether it was book 1 or book 2, we were on the covers. I think I was on the cover with Terry Garber of all the Sunday magazines. I'm not sure whether that was the second book or the first book. And that was a kick. And I did have people stopping me in the streets at that time. I remember on New York. And that was the first taste I ever had of that. You know, and you said you were surprised by the Southern thing. I got offered a number of Southern roles. I did one of them. I did one of the first TNT TV movies that was directed by Delbart Mann, who was sort of a contemporary of Sidney Lumet. That was about the Monitor and the Merrimack in the Civil War, and it was a wonderfully written part of a Southern lieutenant. But I think I turned down other things because I didn't want people to see me one way. And when I think back, I said, I should have taken everything. I should have just say yes, you know, because that's, at a certain point, you just go, just say yes. If it's not terrible, or if it's not pornography, or if it's not, say yes. You're an actor, just act.
I mean, you said it was quite fun. It didn't seem like a big deal. Like, was that the vibe off camera? Fun? Because obviously it's a long, a long production.
Was the vibe off camera fun?
Yeah,
It was
what was the
fun.
vibe? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it was very convivial. I mean, it was a big group of people, and we would fly in and out of South Carolina or Mississippi. And I was visiting my wife in Scotland while she was doing Highlander. So I was like, we didn't have kids yet, but it was like I was, there was some partying that went along that I wasn't really into. But I was very friendly, and I had, look, I love working. I love going to work. Whenever I've done, it's such a gift to be working with a large ensemble of people. I thought the directors were good. I don't think anybody was. I mean, I know there's stories about Patrick, may he rest in peace, and sometimes he did sleep in, and sometimes we had to knock loudly on his door to get him up. But I also spent a few evenings, drinking wine with him, staying up until sunset and having good conversations. So it was great having, just a really meaty chunk of work to do, and to go to work every day with a large group of people, and everything was challenging. Everything was challenging. I mean, I remember one of the big sword fight that I had with Patrick, which took 2 days to shoot in very, very hot and steamy weather. I remember Patrick saying, "Okay, Phil, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to make it real. We're going to make it real. We're just going to let it happen." And I went to Patrick. I said, "No, Patrick, we're not going to let it happen. We're going to rehearse it, and we're going to really rehearse it to, we're going to rehearse it. If it takes 10 hours to rehearse it before we shoot it, because I want to get everything right, so that then we could, he had a different point of view." But we met in the middle, and we had I think we had a good working relationship. I had a good working relationship with pretty much, I didn't have any problems working relationships wise with anybody on the set, even if we had different ways of working. Jim Reed accidentally clocked me once, punched me in the nose when it got too close, but it wasn't his intention.
If I don't mind, I'll throw a couple of names at you, because you work with some great people. Gene Kelly, because I think you're the only person that actually had a scene with him.
I was, a huge Gene Kelly fan. And I was very lucky. For example, some of my character got to work with Liz Taylor for one. Spent an entire day with her. I was pretty much the only person who had a scene with her. And with Gene. Gene was very present. He was a little uncomfortable that day, I remember. He was a little grouchy. I actually think one of our scenes, I think we did 2 or 3 scenes, and I think one didn't end up there. But I was of two minds. I mean, partially because of my training as an actor. I was thrilled to be working with Gene. But I willed myself never to be intimidated by anybody I was working with, especially given the character that I was playing. So we had a good, it was great. It was great. I think, and then the day with Liz Taylor was extraordinary. We had a good friend of mine in common who was her stepchild, or I don't know how you would put it. Kate Burton, the actress, is a very good friend of mine. And so Kate said, "Please say hello," because she knew Liz. And of course, she's Richard Burton's child with Sybil, not with Liz. So she got very comfortable with me very quickly, and we chatted, and she showed me her diamond ring that she was wearing, and she told me she was supposed to be wearing the $175,000 insurance copy. The real ring was supposed to be in the safe. She said, no, this is the real rig. So, no, it was great. And I worked with Morgan Fairchild, and I worked with Hal Holbrook, and, and I also observed all those people as they were working and watched them work. So I was learning on the job as well.
Mm.
I didn't come feeling, it was such a great opportunity to watch other people work. Even my contemporaries, even the way they worked. I was interested, I had my own way of working. And since I was, I guess, in my 30s at the time, early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. And I watched, I listened, tried to be present, tried to give them something to act off of, tried to make them feel that it was worth their while being here, not just a paycheck, because I'm sure in some ways, maybe Gene was just there for a paycheck. I don't know. I think Liz was enticed to be there. She was in terrible pain with this. She was in that dress with the very tight boned structure of the dress, and she had to sit down and take a load off for her to be comfortable. I don't know. It was great.
You've mentioned Patrick Swayze, of course, as well, because of course your character, the whole series, really, even into book 3, is gunning for him, really.
Patrick, I knew. Patrick and I had done a pilot many years before we did North and South together. It was called The Renegades.
Right. Yeah.
So I knew Patrick from before, and I knew about his dance background. And Patrick was a character. He didn't approach acting the same way that I did. I think he took it as a more improvisational thing. But he was, look, he popped on screen, and he became sort of a matinee idol, actually, right? I mean, after Ghost, and so he drove us all crazy sometimes because he stayed up all night and could barely get up the next morning. But we had a good time.
Now, obviously, there are 3 books, but when it came to television, book 1 and 2 were kind of back to back, and then 3 was a few years later. Was it always expected that there would be a third?
No, it was a
series?
surprise.
Was it?
Okay. It was a surprise. Yeah, no, it came out of nowhere. And Patrick, in fact, didn't do that last. He didn't do the first scene, which was too bad. But they couldn't come to a deal. And I think at that time Patrick was making movies. Yes.
Yeah.
I think he was making movies then. So, but for me, it was in my part in book 3, actually, although I think some people feel that book 3 is the lesser of the 3. It's 6 hours, but I got to work with, what is his name? Kyle Chandler.
Yeah.
From, when he was first starting out.
Mm.
And I got to take my character to an even more extreme level. And again, I had to always be aware of grounding that character. By the way, I've only had this is my pandemic beard. I've only had this for a couple of months. I've had a bunch of auditions for which it's right. So I've kept it. Yeah.
And then finally for me then, really, North and South, where do you think it kind of ranks in your career? Are you able to evaluate it that way? You kind of said at the start that people do occasionally still kind of mention it and bring it up. Is it something that you still kind of get recognized for in that way?
Well, it's two different questions. One, where does it rank in my view of my career, and where, yeah, sure, it comes up. I see once, I'm not on Facebook very often, but when I am, I notice that there's a sort of a faithful North and South fan group. No, I feel I look back on it very fondly. I feel very proud of the work that I did there. As even if I might change some things from looking at it, I feel like, oh, I could have done that differently, better. No, it ranks up there with a number. It ranks up there with Sinatra. It ranks up there with some of the smaller roles I've done, but the ensemble pieces. I loved working on The Post, even though it wasn't a huge role. I was part of an ensemble. I just love being part of a company. And that was like being part of a company. It's like doing a TV series. You're part of a company. I did a series called Strong Medicine for 6 years. I was part of a company of actors who was doing it. We did 100 episodes. When I was in Oz, just for the 2 seasons that I was in Oz, I loved the group of, I love fitting in someplace, and more as, I'm not getting the leading roles, but I'm getting more supporting roles, and not as frequently. But when I do, with something like The Post, or when I work with, I think it was 2018 or 2017 when I worked with Trevor, we did Pericles, and it was a good part that I played, but we worked for, I was part of an ensemble. And it made me feel that one of the reasons that I fell in love with acting was the camaraderie, was, the moving towards a singular goal with this group of people. So oddly enough, Pericles and The Post rank right up there, smaller roles that I've done, but with wonderful companies. So it's up there in the top 3 or 5.